letter was already burning in the grate when Thea arrived at the solicitor's office, and she knew then that her uncle had been there first. She stood in the doorway of Mr. Dane, Colburn's office on Grattan Street, and watched the last corner of paper curl into ash. And she did not say anything, because there was nothing left to say. The will was gone. The estate was gone. Everything her father had spent 30 years building in the cold hills of Northumberland had been signed away with a single forged signature while she was still wearing black. Her name was Theodora Ashwell. She was 23 years old. She had arrived in London with £42, a trunk of her mother's dresses, and the particular kind of fury that has no outlet because the law has already decided who wins. "I am sorry, Miss Ashwell," Mr. Colburn said. He did not look at her. "Your uncle's claim has been filed and accepted. Blackthorn Hall passes to him upon completion of probate." "My father's letter," she said. "There is no letter." She had known he would say that. She had known it since the morning she'd gone to the writing desk in her father's study and found the drawer empty, the key missing, and her uncle standing at the window with his hands behind his back like a man who had already won. His name was Bramwell Ashwell, and he had never once in Thea's memory been a kind man. He had smiled at funerals. He had commented on the cost of flowers. He had looked at Blackthorn Hall the way a man looks at a thing he intends to take. She did not go back to the lodgings she had rented near the Strand. She walked instead to the river, and stood there for a long time watching the water go gray under the afternoon clouds. £42. One trunk. The deed to an estate she could not prove was hers. And then she thought of the name her father had written in the margin of a letter she had memorized before her uncle could take that too. Caldwell. Lord Caldwell of Merstham. "He was your grandfather's closest friend," her father had written. "He is not a gentleman, but he is a fair one. If you are ever without recourse, Thea, go to Merstham. Tell him who you are." She had thought it dramatic at the time. She had folded the letter and put it in the lining of her winter coat and thought her father was being morbid. He had been 51 and in excellent health, and there had been no reason to memorize the name of a man she had never met. She was very sorry now that she had ever thought that. Merstham Hall sat at the end of a road that was more suggestion than fact, surrounded by oaks that had been old when the house was built and were ancient now. Thea arrived on a hired coach that left her at the gate, and she stood for a moment in the October cold and looked at the house and tried to feel something other than afraid. She had not written ahead. She had not announced herself. She had done something considerably more reckless. She had answered an advertisement. Wanted. A woman of reliable character and some education for the position of companion secretary to the household at Merstham. References required. Apply in person to Mrs. Peel, housekeeper. She had no references. She had fabricated them on the stationery of a woman who had been her governess 15 years ago and was now living in Bath and unlikely to be contacted before winter. Her name, for the purposes of this application, was Jane Marrow. She was 23, recently widowed, that had seemed simpler than explaining, and in need of respectable employment. She had one goal: get inside the house. Find whatever records existed of her grandfather's friendship with Lord Caldwell. Find something that could prove what her uncle had destroyed. She picked up her bag and walked to the door. The housekeeper, Mrs. Peel, was a small woman with the kind of stillness that comes from managing large households for many years. She looked at Thea with the assessing calm of someone who has interviewed a great many people and made correct judgments about most of them. "Mrs. Marrow," she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "You are younger than I expected." "I was married very young," Thea said. This was the most difficult sentence she had said all week, and she said it without flinching, because she had practiced. Mrs. Peel looked at her for another moment. Then she stepped back from the door. "Come in, then. His lordship is away until Thursday. I will show you the position and you may decide if it suits." It suited. Thea took it. The work itself was not difficult. Lord Caldwell's correspondence had accumulated during 3 months of his absence. He had been in Edinburgh on estate business, and it required organizing, sorting, responding to the routine inquiries with standard letters, flagging the rest. Thea was good at this. She had managed her father's correspondence for 4 years before his death, and she understood the particular grammar of estate management, the tone required for solicitors and tenants and men who wrote letters about fencing disputes. She worked in a small room off the library, which suited her, because the library was enormous. On her 3rd day she understood why her father had told her to come here. The room ran the full length of the east wing, 2 stories of shelves with a gallery above, and at the far end, beside the window, there was a portrait. An older man, seated, with the kind of face that has been outdoors most of its life. He was holding a letter. In the corner of the portrait, barely visible, the painter had included a small detail that Thea nearly missed: a silver-mounted writing box, and on the lid, the Ashwell family crest. She stood in front of it for a long time. Her grandfather had been here, not just known this man, had been here, in this room, probably in that chair. They had been close enough that the Caldwell family had kept the crest visible in a formal portrait, which meant someone had wanted it there, had considered it worth preserving. There were records here. She was certain of it. She just needed time to find them. Lord Caldwell arrived on Wednesday, not Thursday, and Thea was in the library when she heard the horses. She had been told he was not a gentleman. She had imagined something large and cold, a man made of weather and old money. She had not imagined someone who came through the front door still in his riding coat and stopped short when he saw the library door standing open. He was perhaps 35. Dark-haired. He had the kind of face that had decided something a long time ago and not changed its mind since. Mrs. Peel said she'd taken on a secretary, he said. He was looking at her directly, which most men in his position did not do with the hired staff. You're earlier than I expected. I have been here 5 days, my lord, Thea said. I meant in the library. She had the correspondence sorted on the table beside her. She gestured to it, because this was easier than answering the observation directly. I have organized your post by category. The tenants' concerns are flagged in red. The solicitors' letters I have kept separate. There are 3 that require your attention before Friday. He crossed the room without looking at the letters and looked instead at what she had been reading before he arrived. It was a household ledger from 1849, which was not a reasonable thing for his secretary to be reading, and she knew it the moment his eyes moved to it. Is that the 1849 ledger? He said. Yes, my lord. Why? She could have lied. She had lies prepared for most contingencies, but something about the directness of him made lying feel like the wrong tool. I was looking at the household records, she said carefully. I found a reference to a name I recognized. Whose name? Ashwell. He was very still for a moment. Then he looked at her, and it was a different kind of looking than before. Not assessing, exactly, but careful. Where are you from, Mrs. Merrill? She held his gaze. Northumberland, my lord. He said nothing. He picked up the 3 letters she had flagged and read through them without sitting down, and then he set them back on the table and walked out of the library. And Thea stood there with her heart making a great deal of noise and her face doing nothing at all. That evening, Mrs. Peel knocked on the door of Thea's small room near the kitchen. His lordship would like to see you in the study, she said. Now, if you please. The study was warmer than the library, a working room rather than an impressive one. There were maps on the wall and 3 different piles of paper that suggested ongoing projects, and Lord Caldwell was standing at the window with his back to her when she entered. Close the door, he said. She did. What is your name, he said. And I would appreciate the truth this time. Thea had known this moment would come. She had played it out in her mind during the 5 days she had worked in that house, in a dozen different versions, and in none of them had it come this quickly or felt this quiet. Theodora Ashwell, she said. My father was James Ashwell of Blackthorn Hall in Northumberland. He died in March. His estate was taken by my uncle through a forged document, and I have no legal recourse at present because the original will was destroyed before I could act on it. My father told me before he died that if I was ever without recourse I should come here and tell you who I am." He turned from the window. She had expected anger. He had been lied to after all, and men in his position generally took that badly. What she had not expected was the way he looked at her, not with anger, but with something that was almost recognition. "Sit down, Miss Ashwell," he said. She sat. He went to the desk and opened the bottom drawer and took out a box she recognized immediately, though she had never seen it before. It was a writing box, silver-mounted, with a crest on the lid. Her grandfather's crest. "My father kept this," Lord Caldwell said. "He told me to keep it after him. He told me that one day an Ashwell might come and need what was in it." Thea's hands were very still in her lap. "What is in it?" He set the box on the desk and turned it to face her. Inside, in careful order, were letters, a great many of them, and beneath the letters a document. Thick paper, formally written, bearing a notary seal. "Your grandfather and my father made an agreement in 1831, Lord Caldwell said. A formal one, witnessed and sealed. In the event that either family faced a fraudulent claim against their property, the other family would stand as witness to the legitimate line of inheritance. Your grandfather signed for my father's estate in 1843 when my father's brother attempted something not entirely unlike what your uncle has done." Thea looked at the document. She did not touch it yet. "My father wrote to your father about this," Lord Caldwell continued, 3 months before his death, it seems. The letter arrived after." She thought about the letter in her father's study, the drawer that had been empty, her uncle at the window. "He never received it," she said. "No." A pause. "But the agreement still holds. I am the current Lord Caldwell. My father's signature is witnessed by a notary still living in Edinburgh. And I knew your grandfather, Miss Ashwell, not well. I was a boy when he died, but I knew him well enough to remember his face." He looked at her for a moment, and then he said, very quietly, "You have his eyes." Thea did not cry. She had made a decision some weeks ago that she would not cry until this was finished, and she kept to it, though it required a particular kind of effort she had not anticipated. "What happens now?" she said. "Now," Lord Caldwell said, "I write to my solicitor in London, and you stop calling yourself Mrs. Merrill." The weeks that followed were not simple. Nothing about recovering a stolen estate is simple, and Thea had been under no illusions about that. There were letters and counterclaims, and a great deal of time spent in the offices of men who communicated primarily through documents. Lord Caldwell's solicitor was a man named Mr. Hargreave, formidable and precise, and he descended on the matter with the calm efficiency of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of problem. Thea worked. That was what she did. It was what she knew how to do. She continued as secretary to the household at Merstham because there was no reason not to, and because it gave her something to do with her hands while she waited. She organized correspondence and wrote letters and sorted the tenants' concerns, and in the evenings she sat in the library and read. And sometimes Lord Caldwell came in and sat across the room with his own reading, and neither of them spoke much, which turned out to be comfortable rather than awkward. She learned things about him in that time. That he was precise about certain things and indifferent to others, that he read quickly and remembered what he read, that he did not talk about himself as a habit, but that he listened with a quality of attention that most people did not. Genuinely listened, in the way that meant he would refer to something you had said 3 weeks earlier as though it mattered. She had told him one evening about the morning she had gone to her father's study and found the drawer empty. He had listened to the whole account without interrupting. Then he had said, "Did you know what he'd taken before you saw him at the window?" "Yes," she said. "I knew when I saw his face." Lord Caldwell had nodded, as though this was the correct answer to something he had been wondering about. She did not know what to make of him most of the time. He was not an easy man. He was not an easy man. He was not especially warm, but he had taken a document from a locked drawer and set it on the desk in front of her without being asked. And that was the kind of thing that could not be undone once you knew it. In November, her uncle came to Merstham. He had not announced himself, which Thea thought was characteristic of him. He arrived in a hired carriage on a Tuesday morning and presented himself at the door and asked to see Lord Caldwell, and Mrs. Peel, who had been informed of the situation and had opinions about it, told him to wait. Thea was in the library. She heard his voice in the hall before she could see him. It had the same quality she remembered. A certain smoothness, the kind of voice that believed it was always the reasonable one in the room. Lord Caldwell came to the library door. "He is asking to speak with you directly," he said. "You do not have to. I can send him away." "I know," Thea said. She set down the paper she had been holding. "I would like to see him." He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded and stepped back. Bramwell Ashwell had not changed very much. He was a tall man, going soft at the edges, with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of being correct because no one had stopped him. He came into the library and his eyes went to Thea, and something shifted in his face. Not guilt. She did not think he was capable of guilt, but calculation. "Theodora," he said. "Uncle." "I have been looking for you," he said. "I was worried. A young woman alone in London." "Sit down," Lord Caldwell said from behind him. Her uncle turned. He had not, apparently, expected Lord Caldwell to still be in the room. He looked at him with the slight narrowing of a man recalibrating. "My lord," he said, "I don't believe we've been formally introduced." "I know who you are," Lord Caldwell said. He did not sit. "And I know what you did. My solicitor has already filed the relevant documents with the probate court. The witness statements have been collected. The notarized agreement between my father and Miss Ashwell's grandfather is a matter of legal record." "That agreement," her uncle said, "concerns men who have been dead for 20 years. Agreements between families do not expire," Lord Caldwell said. "Mr. Hargreave will be happy to explain the relevant statute if you would like, though I imagine your own solicitor will reach the same conclusion once he has read the filing." Her uncle looked at him. Then he looked at Thea. It was the first time in her life she had seen him look at a situation and find it already finished. "You cannot prove the will was forged," he said. "We do not need to prove the will was forged," Lord Caldwell said. "We need only prove that the original, legitimate document supersedes the claim your uncle has filed, which it does." Thea watched her uncle's face. She had imagined this moment many times, usually as something loud, something final. It was quiet instead. He stood in the library of Merstham Hall with his argument already losing its shape, and she thought, "My father was right," he said. "Go to Merstham. Tell him who you are." "I think you should go," she said. Her voice came out even and certain. Her uncle looked at her once more, as though he might find some leverage he had missed. He did not find it. He left. Blackthorn Hall was returned to her in December. She stood in the entrance hall of her childhood home on a cold morning and looked at the rooms she had grown up in, slightly wrong without her father in them, and felt the particular ache of things that have been recovered but cannot be restored. The house was hers again. Her father was not in it, she thought. Standing there, that grief is a complicated thing to carry alongside relief. That they do not cancel each other out, they simply exist at the same time, which is more exhausting than either one alone. Lord Caldwell had ridden with her from Merstham. He had not offered to. He had simply appeared at the carriageway at 7 in the morning, mounted and ready. She had not told him not to come. He was standing at the library window when she found him, looking out at the north garden her father had maintained with the devotion of a man who believed gardens were moral obligations. "Your grandfather planted those oaks," Thea said. "I know." He turned. "He wrote to my father about it. He said he planted them the year your father was born." She looked at the trees. They were bare now, November oaks, but she knew what they looked like in summer. Enormous and particular and there. "Did you know?" she said. "When I told you my name, did you recognize it immediately?" "Yes," Lord Caldwell said, "and the ledger. You understood what I was looking for. I suspected." A pause. "I thought you might be exactly who you turned out to be." You could have asked me directly. I could have. Asked me directly. I could have. He considered this. You would have lied. She thought about it. Probably, she said honestly. Something shifted in his face. It was not quite a smile. His face was not built for easy expressions, but it was something. Your father's letter is still in this house, he said. I believe your uncle hid it rather than destroyed it. There is a particular kind of man who keeps things he should have burned because some part of him wants to be found out. Mr. Hargrave's men have already begun looking. Thea turned from the window. You did not tell me that, she said. I am telling you now. She stood there in her father's library, in the house that was hers again, and looked at this man who had taken a box from a locked drawer and set it on the desk without being asked, who had ridden 40 miles in the cold without explanation, who had suspected who she was and waited anyway. Why, she said, and she meant all of it at once. The waiting, the riding, the box, the 40 miles. He did not answer immediately. He turned back to the window, to the oaks her grandfather had planted the year her father was born. Because your grandfather kept his word to mine, he said, for 40 years across 2 generations through things neither of them lived to finish, because some things are owed. He paused. And because, he said, more quietly, I wanted to see what you would do when you ran out of room to lie. Thea looked at him. She thought about the library at Merstham, the evenings that had been comfortable rather than awkward. She thought about a man who listened the way that meant he would remember. And what did I do? She said. You told the truth, Lord Caldwell said, immediately, without being asked twice. He said it like it was the answer he had been hoping for. The winter light came through the north windows and lay flat across the floor of her father's library. And the oaks stood bare and enormous in the garden outside. And for the first time since March, Thea Ashwell felt the ground solid under her feet.